Hi, Gary.
Hi, how are you, Boyd?
How are you this morning?
Very good. Thank you.
Why are we gathered here today? You're on.
Good morning, everyone. This is Gary Lippman. We're here to discuss Boyd Taylor's article in the new Westminster Literary Review. And I'm here because I at one time did some broadcast interviewing way back in the years when I was in graduate school at the University of Minnesota for the NPR station there. And I'm going to be talking to Boyd and asking him about the article that he wrote for our book, our new literary review. So Boyd, I'm just going to run through your background here a little bit to save a little time, and I'll just read this. It won't take much time, and then we'll get on and talk about your writing background and about your article in the literary review.
Well, thank you.
How's that sound?
Could I, before you get to me, could I just thank you for the article that you submitted to the literary review? I really enjoyed reading it. It's called "The Wonders of Slow Pitch Softball." I believe that's
Yes.
Yeah, that was a really interesting story, and I felt that I really did enjoy it. So, what's the difference, just for my edification, between slow pitch softball and regular softball?
Oh, the regular softball is smaller. The regular softball would be about roughly about like this. Well, about like this, and then the slow pitch well, actually, they use the regular softball in slow pitch. The difference is the type of pitch. The regular softball, the ball comes in on a straight line and very fast, and in the slow pitch softball, it comes in an arc and goes slowly because of that, and that is supposed to guarantee that the batters have a chance to hit, and you don't get any of these no hit games where nobody gets on base.
Yeah, we had a woman softball pitcher at UT here who Kat, what's her last name, but she struck out most of the people that she faced.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that wasn't slow pitch.
Okay, well, I've learned something today. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you for those kind words. So I'm going to tell the audience just a little bit about, excuse me. I'm going to tell the audience just a little bit about you. You were born in Temple, Texas, and then attended college and law school at the University of Texas. You work, and what kind of law did you practice?
I practiced oil and gas law for about 10
Okay.
years before I went into management with the company I was with.
Okay. And and you practiced for about 10 or 12 years, and then you went to work for a chemical and energy company in Boston. And in 1989, you moved back to Austin, where you had lived. And I guess your wife, when you were moving back to Boston, asked you, did you think you would ever return to Austin? And you said, of course. And 30 years later, you did?
I keep my word.
Do I have that right?
Yeah,
yeah, I got that.
Word.
Okay. And you now serve, among other things, on the Westminster Board of Directors. And this is also your third year as president of the Residents Association.
That's right.
Okay. So that's a quick summary of your background, and impressive background. But I think what we really wanted to hear today is about your writing. And you wrote a story, as I did, for the first issue of the New Literary Review. I wonder if you could read a little bit about it. If you could read a little bit about it for us.
Sure, I'd be happy to. The story is titled "A Family Matter," and I'll just read the introductory paragraphs. Edwin put his briefcase on the table and picked up his mail from the floor where the carrier had pushed it through the mail slot. He laid it on the dining table. He would look at it later during dinner, during the PBS NewsHour. He always saved the mail for dinner time, although he had been taught as a child that one did not read at the table. One sat upright at the table, no elbows, please, and engaged in conversation about what one did that day, showed interest in one's dinner companions, discussed the issues of the day. It was a time for family matters. Edwin sank in his leather chair and rubbed his hands over the soft arms. He was more tired than usual today. The tea had been crowded. The walk up the hill from Park Station had tired him, that was all. A nice dinner and a glass of wine, and he would be fine. He had to admit, though, that his conversation with Linda had bothered him. Ever since she came over from the Boston Public Library to head the archives department, the archives Edwin had made his lifetime work, he had felt anxious when they talked. Hints of workloads, discussions of the future. "How do you see your future, Edwin?" Linda had asked him. "You're probably looking forward to spending more time with your family. Do you have family in the Boston area, Edwin?" His family was none of her business, was it? But what choice did he have but to answer her? No, he had no family in the area. That was all he would give her, although, in truth, there was no one since his mother had died in Akron 20 years ago.
Well, thank you for that. I've read that story, and I can tell you that it's very easy to follow, and that the writing is very clean and clear. And if anybody else, whoever else wants to read it, I think will feel the same way.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions, and then we'll get more into your writing. How long have you been writing?
I started writing in high school. I was editor of the school newspaper, and so I was writing from an early age.
And you wrote for the high school. You were editor of the high school paper, and were you editor of the college paper too?
I was a year in junior college in Temple, and I was the editor of the junior college paper.
Okay.
By the time I got to the university, I was set for pre-law. And
okay. And you have, but you didn't start what you might call serious writing until after you retired in 1989?
That's right. I had a lot, I had creative writing courses at UT under Professor Gerald Langford, who was really a wonderful instructor and taught me a lot, but I didn't really feel that I had the time for serious writing until I retired.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How many books have you published?
I published, self-published, four novels. They have a recurring character. And then I've just completed the first draft of the fifth and last novel in that series, the Donnie Ray Quinn series, and I'm working with River Grove Press on it.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the search that you conducted to try to find an agent for the first book.
Well, it was really a exhausting experience. I'd worked with a writing coach he gave me a list of agents and said the way you do this is you make copies of your manuscripts and you send inquiry letters out. You send them a first chapter and you send inquiry letters. And here's 250 agents, and just go down the list. And so that's what I did. But I wore out.
250?
I wore out well before I got to the 250th,
Oh.
but I never got a reply. I mean, maybe one person or two I even got an answer from. So it was exhausting and not productive. And it was about that time that self-publishing moved from being just a vanity press to print on demand, which is what Amazon has done so enormously since then. And so there became a platform for people to self-publish their work in an economic way and to then try to find a readership instead of trying to find an agent. But the downside of that is there's such a proliferation of material that's being self-published that it's almost impossible to find an audience. But the pleasure of the writing is not necessarily the striking it rich or hitting the jackpot. The pleasure is in seeing your ideas expressed and on the page.
Well, I think there's you do like writing for additional reasons. Tell us why you like writing so much.
Well, I like to write to explore things that I have wondered about or thought about, or people that I have known or seen or read about, but mainly my pleasure or satisfaction in writing is to find out how I feel about those things, because I've found that it's the process that allows you to find out really what your own convictions and feelings are about matters, and until you actually force yourself to sit down and put it on paper, it's just a thought. Once you write it down, you learn something about it and about yourself.
I think you said that these are not exactly your words, but you were surprised at how the content changed, or how your thoughts changed about the book as you went along.
That's true. I've found that the characters have take on a life of their own, and whereas I had you plotted out in your mind as sort of a straight line from the beginning of the book to the end, but the characters don't always want to go that way, and so you will find that that they argue with you and have their own ideas about how they should develop. And so the creative process, I think, involves letting your characters speak and finding, by working with them and writing about them, that they have complexities that you didn't imagine when you began.
What is the plot through these 5 books?
Well, the first one, called Hero, traces the story of a young college history student, a grad student, who stumbles on some intriguing material in the state archives, and casts aspersions on a candidate for governor, a well-known attorney general who's running for governor. And so he's prevailed upon by his best friend to send that what was going to be his thesis, to send it to a magazine for publication, and it's published and affects the election. And it turns out at the end that Donnie has been misled and misused and used by his friend and by the political machine, and that he's been betrayed in a sense. And so
This is the young writer.
This is the protagonist in the first book, and so the other books deal with other aspects of his life as he matures, as he goes off to Mexico with his beautiful wife. But then she meets a tragic death, which he blames himself for. And so the rest of the series involves him in different places and doing different things, mostly Austin and the Texas Panhandle where I lived. He becomes a lawyer from a third-rate law school. He loses his ambition, but he has such characteristics that he's such a good person, despite all his despondency, that he recovers, but he has these periodic times of guilt that he can't absolve himself from. So it's they're stories of they're political thrillers, or this last one, the legal thriller. There's always a story that Donnie finds himself wrapped up in. One deals with developers in Austin, and the other deals with water rights and the crisis in the Panhandle. But throughout it all, Donnie is burdened by these feelings that he has from the death of his wife, and earlier on in his childhood from his abandonment by his mother. So as he matures, we see him struggle with those clouds that hang over him, but at the same time demonstrate that he's a resilient and competent and good person.
You said you get pleasure from writing, but you were seldom satisfied with the way things were going.
Seldom satisfied
with the way things were going.
Yeah, it's hard it's easy I don't find it difficult to write, but when I go back and reread it and rewrite, that's when things get dodgy, and it's really hard for me to the process of getting something ready to publish is a hard one for me.
Mm-hmm.
There are authors who take 10 days or 10 weeks to write a page. It takes them 5 years to write a book, and their pieces are wonderful. And but I don't have that kind of patience. I want to see how things are going to turn out. So maybe I write a little faster, or maybe too fast, and that makes makes it more difficult to do the finished product.
I'm a former reporter, and I once saw a writer in a bookshop who said that whatever I see on the page is the way it comes off his typewriter, and I wanted to slug him.
Well, the guy that wrote the series about Lyndon Johnson in his first book about Lyndon, he said he was talking about, or maybe he wrote a book about his personal life, the story of writing the Johnson book. And when he was a reporter in New Jersey, that was the advice that his managing editor there gave him. He said, you write with your fingers and not with your brain. So so he outlined every page, and he had an object an objective for every page, and he put it up on the bulletin board. And every sentence he wrote, it was, does this, he asked himself how that did that sentence help move toward the objective. And that's a discipline that maybe you have as a newspaper man, but I certainly don't have as a fiction writer.
What's the message in the books?
Well, I think the message is that there is hope, and with courage and hope you can overcome adversity, and that ultimately one's ability to do that is dependent on himself and those he chooses to surround himself with.
And you said, I think there's something in the new story that is consistent with that.
Yeah, this is the fifth book, and the working title is Fade to Black. And so I conclude the Donnie Ray quintet with this book. And in it, he's able to finally discover truths about himself, about his early age, and to, through some fairly difficult circumstances, find the ability to forgive himself, and to so when the book ends, we leave him in that condition.
And last question, I think in the short story that you just wrote for the literary review, the man in the story, the middle-aged man, adopts his ex-wife's son. He's been very unhappy and very lonely, and he takes this step to improve himself, and that seems to me to be a little consistent with the rest of your messages.
I think it is. I think it's in Edwin's case, it's the decision to seize the opportunity to be happy.
Yeah.
And he's let life. He's life is a current, and he's floated along with it, except for one time in his life when he had made a courageous decision, and he was always surprised when he looked back at that. And then in this story, he has the opportunity to do something courageous or risky again for the sake of finding happiness. And so I think it's a story of hope. And I don't think, somebody told me they didn't know I was a romantic, and it's a romantic story, but I think it is it's intended to be a story of hope.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I just want to tell the audience that the literary journal is on sale in the little store on the, well, we all know where that is, and it's $15 for the book and $17.50 for the big print edition, and you can charge it to your Westminster account.
Well, thank you, Gary. I enjoyed it today.
Me too.